You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
You're listening to IRN, 2014 Border Zone International UFO Conference.
Our next speaker sat at the right hand of Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry, having worked as a scriptwriter for Star Trek, The Next Generation. David Bennett Carren went on to script rights for many famous science fiction and suspense television shows, including The Twilight Zone, Stargate SG-1, Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, Tech War, Beyond Reality, and more. His science fiction novel, No Power on Earth, deals with an insidious alien invasion of Earth. Over the years, David has directed, written, or produced more than 200 films and television shows and has won numerous awards. He is currently an associate professor at the University of Texas Pan American in Edinburgh, Texas, where he teaches screenwriting, film directing, film history, and video editing. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome David Bennett Carren.
Okay, first off, who here is interested in any aspect of creative writing, directing, producing, anything like that? Okay. All right. I've never encountered an alien. Well, Jerry Anderson I worked with in England might be called an alien, I guess, especially if he visited the States. And I'm not part of the UFO thing at all. But like so many young kids, one of the first films I saw was The Man from Planet X when I was a kid. Anyone remember The Man from Planet X? Arch Oboler, wonderful little movie, all but forgotten. And like every other kid who watched that movie, it was a very interesting approach to what an alien is. In other words, he was very different, but at the same time he was very human, had very human issues or identifiable issues. He couldn't speak, which made him more interesting. And just a very rich idea. And of course, like any little kid, I wanted very much to meet him. Even though he did try to destroy the Earth, I understood why, because the people in Scotland treated him badly, where the film was set. In any case, it's one of the many things that pulled me into writing science fiction, where the ideas of things, beings, worlds, dimensions, beings, whatever you want to call it, beyond what we had. And I'm sure everyone can identify, I grew up in Dallas in the 50s, and trust me, Dallas in the 50s was as boring as any place you could imagine. And this kind of material, Outer Limits when I was a kid, Twilight Zone, Forbidden Planet, all that material was a lifesaver for me. And I like writing that kind of material. I very much enjoy writing science fiction. And luckily, when I went out to Los Angeles to be a TV writer, there was just starting then an interest in producing science fiction TV again. There was a long lull after Star Trek, the original series, where science fiction television was dead. Science fiction television and movies was dead. Between the early 60s and the 70s, there was 10, 15 years, 20 years there when no one wanted to touch it. Then Star Wars changed things. And people started to notice that, wow, really good science fiction will sell tickets. And then Next Generation came back and people noticed, wow, science fiction television can really work. And now it's all over the tube. Oh, I still call it the tube. I guess it's the plasma screen now. Walking Dead. Lost was very science fictional. Z Nation. Battlestar Galactica, which I actually worked on the 80s version. I have to admit the new version was a big improvement. And it's evolved. I mean, I'll use that word. Science fiction television has evolved. Fantasy television, whatever you want to call it. But there are certain things that remain the same. And I'm going to get into that right now. I think I'll start out. Well, first, the first show that comes up is Space Precinct, which we'll get back to later. I'll get to that in a second. Now, the thing I'm proudest about with Star Trek, it is the Writers Guild came up with a very carefully worked out evaluation of the 101 best written television series. And the show I worked on, they sent me the certificate. Star Trek's one of the best 101 television series ever produced in the history of TV. I'm very proud of that. I agree with it wholeheartedly. If you know anything about the history, of course, how many people, I know a lot of people here know the history of the original show, right? Gene Roddenberry and all that. Next Generation, Gene Roddenberry was running the show at the beginning of the process, of the first season really, and then the second season. And honestly, he, in some ways wasn't quite up to it. He was doing more a plot-directed, concept-directed show. Then a new executive producer, they went through several executive producers and supervising producers or producers. And the winning team, the team that made the show really work, was Rick Berman and Michael Piller. And between the two of them, they realized the thing that will make this show work is character-directed material, not plot-directed material. And all the point I'm trying to make here is the best science fiction is character-directed. It's not plot-directed. The thing that's difficult is you need a science fiction concept in there to make it interesting and true science fiction. But how do you do that without it overwhelming or destroying or negating the value of character? And of course, the best material takes characters or people that we can relate to, even if they're aliens, and puts them in a situation that's science fictional. And then through that experience, a comment is made on the human condition today. And you can get into things like slavery and racial discrimination and environmental disaster. My opinion of the zombie apocalypse series is there's an appeal on several levels, some of them very unhealthy. On one level, it's about how we all feel that very much a modern feeling today, a modern feeling for many human beings today is that at some point civilization will collapse and will be reduced to eating each other or fighting each other off or keep each other from eating each other. That's one fear. Another is the real human desire to be a hero. We all have that desire on some level or another, and we all want to be a hero. And then there's another level it works where there are people amongst us which hope civilization would collapse so they could pull out their guns and shoot people and be in control. So it serves a lot of different things because, of course, the basic concept of zombies, as I hate to mention this, is utterly and completely impossible. There's no way someone can die and come back and have enough brain capacity to actually walk around. And why would they want to bite people? It's ridiculous. It's utterly absurd on every science level you can imagine. An alien wouldn't invent such an absurd thing, but it works dramatically. Okay? So to get to Star Trek, again, the basic science of Star Trek, which was very carefully worked out. Gene Roddenberry and the late Gene Kuhn, and anyone remember Gene Kuhn? He was the unsung genius of the original show. He and Roddenberry together worked out the science, the teleporter, the communicators, which we all have now in our pockets. Ironically, we all flip out the same thing they used to flip out. And the mode of energy that would drive them through space, which is the annihilation of antimatter and matter in a containment vessel of some kind, which, of course, is theoretically possible and is further, it's maybe 100, 200 years away, but it's actually theoretically possible. But the bottom line is, what are the character stories? Now, to quote Woody Allen, he was asked about What's Up Tiger Lily, his first movie, and where he got the idea to do what he was doing with that movie. And they said, was this an homage to Max Sennett or whatever? And he said, no, it's not an homage, we stole it. Well, every story you see in science fiction, of course everyone should know, if you don't, that all of the zombie stories you've ever seen are all taken from one book, I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. It's all from that. That's ground zero for this material. And does that mean George Romero did something wrong? He openly acknowledged that he was inspired for Night of the Living Dead by I Am Legend. It's not the same story at all. It's completely different. We were inspired by a James Garner movie, 36 Hours. And if you watched Mission Impossible in the 70s, every other episode of Mission Impossible in the 70s was 36 Hours, which is James Garner is an OSS agent. He's kidnapped right before D-Day by the Germans, taken to a hospital in Bavaria. They dress it up as an American hospital. They put all the German soldiers in American uniforms. They're all speaking unaccented English. And they try to convince him that it's 1946. He's woken up out of a coma, and he's going to be fine. And by the way, what was it like right before D-Day? Why don't you tell us what that was all like? What were the details? And the story went from there. In other words, a force moves a character in your story in time and or place into another time or place to achieve a goal. Okay? So we had this idea that Riker goes on an away team mission, gets gassed in a cave, wakes up, and it's 16 years later, and he's captain of the Enterprise, and he has a son, and a dead wife that he doesn't remember. And the turn in the story is that it's supposedly the Romulans who have done this to him to learn about Outpost 23. The old fans of the show would remember that there were outposts in one episode of the original series where they're chasing a Romulan bird of prey, and they're fighting over outposts, and that's what inspired us. One of the Romulans on that ship is called Decius. When we named a Romulan ship in this, Decius, I was a fan of the show, the original show, so we're trying to honor the history. But he gets gassed, and he finds out that he finds out at one point in the story the whole thing is a plot by the Romulans to get information out of him. But I want to show you the genesis of a scene, because everything you watch that you love in a story is based on the basic dramatic component of the scene. The story comes out, it's like the molecule, it's like the atom of a story is the scene. If the scenes work, it progresses your story forward, introduces your characters, entertains you, and gives you important emotional and dramatic information all at the same time. When you're watching a low-budget movie and you're bored or angry or distracted, the scenes aren't working. That's why the story isn't working. And I'll show you a very important scene in this story. He's trying to reacquaint himself with the son that he doesn't remember, because of course the son doesn't exist, right? So let's look at that. Uh-oh.
Dad.
Are you all right?
Okay. This is the European version of the scene. They were offended by it and blacked it out. Eastern Europe, Here we go.
Dad.
Are you all right?
You have image but no sound.
We'll see if we can get both together.
Okay. Now, I'll tell you the double turn in the story that makes it a story. The plot would be the Romulans are trying to get information out of him. The story, and the reason we're very proud of this, is that little boy who is his son in the story is really an alien who simply wants a father, who's created this whole fantasy to keep him distracted so he can be his dad. And who here doesn't have father or mother issues, right? Okay. Other things you should know about Trek. How many people watch Next Generation? Okay. How many space battles do we have? Space battles did we have? Very few. How many planets did we go to? You hardly ever saw the planets. Really, we only had 3 swing sets.
What happened?
It's broken, but it's going to be all right in just a minute.
And you people that are deaf and dumb now can read it.
Let's go easy on this arm for a little while, okay?
How did this happen?
Dad.
Are you all right?
I'm fine.
It's okay.
What happened?
It's broken, but it's going to be all right in just a minute. Now, let's go easy on this arm for a little while, okay?
How did this happen?
I was in the gym playing Parisi Squares.
Parisi Squares?
I fell off the ramp.
At your age, you could break your neck.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
Continue the compression attenuator for another 2 minutes. Yes, doctor? Can I talk to you for a moment?
I'll be right back.
Will, how old were you when you first started playing Parisi Squares?
All right, I was probably a little younger than he is. It's just that, well, for all practical purposes, this is my first day as a father, and he almost kills himself.
He didn't almost kill himself. He just broke his wrist. Just like a lot of other boys his age when they fall.
You're right. It's difficult.
Difficult for you. What about for Jean-Luc? Can you imagine how he feels? You've lost 16 years. Jean-Luc has lost a lot more than that. First his mother, and now his father.
Good as new, Captain. You can take him home.
Thanks. How's the arm?
It's fine. Dad, I'm really sorry. I mean, I know you have more important things to do.
There is nothing more important than this, son.
Captain?
Deck 8.
Halt. I know how hard this is for you.
It's okay, Dad.
No, okay's not good enough. When I was your age, my own father wasn't there for me, and I really needed him. I've often wondered what kind of father I'd be. I never felt quite ready. The idea even scared me a little.
Scared? You?
Yeah. But I guess I got over it. You're here. Resume. It's important to me that I don't let you down, Jean-Luc.
You never have, Dad. You've always been there for me.
I'll have to take your word for that. Because I don't remember any of it. Your first step, your first tooth, nothing. And I want to remember. I guess there's only one thing we can do. We've got to build some new memories. I'm not sure it's still in the memory banks, but I used to have a great fishing program on the holodeck.
The Curtis Creek program?
You know it.
Sure, we've gone to Curtis Creek lots of times.
Would you like to go again?
You bet.
Well, as soon as these negotiations are out of the way, you and I are going.
Dad.
Are you all right?
Oh, I'm fine.
What?
It's broken.
I was in the gym playing Parisi Squares.
Parisi Squares?
I fell off the ramp.
Dad.
Are you all right?
You'll notice the wonderful little details, the ambient sound in the background, the little hum, the swish of the doors, all these little elements always add up They were very good about all this stuff. I mean, we'd have the production meetings. They would worry about every device, every article of clothing. They were very, very careful about all that stuff. But the very next scene, I guess we lost it. But the very next scene where he figures out that this is not his kid and it's a Romulan plot and it's exposed as a Romulan plot, is classic storytelling in the sense that you have every scene in a story has to have a negative or positive value. And the best stories, you have a negative value scene and then you have a positive value scene. You have some good news. How many times you see a story where, oh wow, we're winning, look at the great stuff that's happened. And then something bad happens, a reversal, an obstacle. That's what good storytelling is. And that's what happened here. Is this scene, he gets close to that little boy and then finds out the whole thing is a fabrication. Now the point about that scene, another point I want to make about that scene was, it was an add-on at the last minute. We were in production, it was the last day, next to last day of production, and the show was short by several minutes. And we needed a scene to move the story forward, but at the same time, that scene couldn't just be filler. It couldn't have new characters or new special effects or new props or new costumes in it. We had no money for that. It had to be a scene that we could shoot quickly. So we went to the turbo lift and we had that moment there between the two of them. And we wrote it very quickly, the executive producer, my partner and I at that time. And the executive producer had kids, I didn't, and said, well gosh, you grow up 16 years, you've never seen your kid lose his first tooth or take his first walk. So that was part of the scene. My dad had just died like months before we shot this. And I said to him just before he died, I said, Dad, you never let me down. That's in there, that feeling. My partner is nuts about fishing.
You all right?
That's all he cares about is fishing.
I'm fine.
So he threw the Curtis Creek thing in there, which is if any of you are fishermen know that's a Shangri-La for a fishing place that doesn't exist. It's a non-existent, wonderful place to fish. It's the perfect place to fish. So they're talking about Curtis Creek. Okay? And therefore that scene is very honest and very emotional. That's why it works. It wasn't even supposed to be in the story. So to me, this is the most important scene in the show, and it was an accident. It wouldn't have happened if we hadn't been short. Currency like this, like we call it money, dramatic money, in a good story is communication through what? What would communication in a good story be through? Anyone want to guess? Huh? It's okay. It's through emotion. Did you say that? Good for you. Oh, there you know all about Aristotle. I'm sorry, I'm old-fashioned. I've never gotten past Aristotle. I know there are a lot of people, especially on the East Coast, that are doing plays where they think you don't need a hero, you don't need an antagonist or protagonist or conflict or plot points. You just have people talk about their lives and express themselves. It's the most boring thing short of standing in line for the post office, is to watch a play where people are sitting in a bar talking about their lives. That's not drama. I don't know what it is, but it's not drama. And this is drama. You have to have conflict, you have to have progression, and it has to be based on something human. Okay? Walking Dead is a very successful series because it's about human. These are very well realized characters experiencing a totally impossible and utterly ridiculous situation. We never see it that way. Okay? Now I don't know if we have the video. Do we have the video for Space Precinct? We probably don't, but let's try. Now I always show Space Precinct. I will show it to you quickly. The fun about space. Anyone remember Space Precinct? Okay. Good, we got it. Just hold it. Jerry Anderson was this producer. He was the Gene Roddenberry of England. And he did puppet shows. And then he wanted to do live action. And he wanted to do Hill Street Blues in space, which was a very good idea for a series, by the way. Cops in space but he very quickly figured out that producing all those interesting characters and interesting multiple storylines was beyond his purview. So then he decided to do Kojak in space, which was not a good idea, an old-fashioned Deben when they were doing the show. And he had certain points of view about production. Anyway, we're in London, and we're having lunch with Jerry in a nice restaurant, because they were shooting this in London. And I told him a true story about being attacked. I was walking in my lab in Venice, where I lived, and we were attacked by a pit bull. And it's very scary. The pit bull bit my leg, left my dog alone. It was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. I know what it's like to be attacked by a man-eating dog. And the dog was destroyed. I had to get a tetanus shot. And he said, this is perfect. We can use this as an episode of Space Precinct. The planets are going to be invaded by these creatures that are giving puppies and these dogs to all the important people on the planet, all the government officials on the planet. Then they'll send out a signal, and the dogs will kill their masters. That's not me. I haven't eaten lately. And it'll kill all their masters, and the planet will be fall into chaos, and then they can invade. I said, that's a good idea, okay. And we know the Jane Garner movie. They only kill their masters. Hey, we did one great James Garner movie for a show. Let's do another one. Okay. And then he said, let's make the dogs labs. How many of you here have ever had a lab? Okay. How scary and ferocious are labs? Dachshunds bite their masters more than labs do. Dachshunds are more dangerous to their owners than labs. So we asked them, how are you going to make... And we knew that in England they didn't have an infrastructure like they do in L.A. I mean, I did an episode of Diagnosis Murder, and we had to interview 6 dogs, I kid you not, to do 2 simple gags. Their trainers came in, 6 dogs. We ended up hiring 2 dogs to do 3 gags. And this is in L.A. where they had an infrastructure for this kind of thing. So where are you going to get killer labs in England? It said, oh no, we'll do it amniotronically. This is what happened.
If you do what I say, I won't hurt you. I repeat, I am not a murderer.
Yeah, any reason why I should believe you?
No,
back
but
there,
you have my
behind
word.
their head there,
I didn't
that's
kill
a Max
Styles
Sennett
and
roll.
Witnesses to put you at the scene of both.
That's not CGI, that's not rear screen
Well, I was
projection. See the
indeed
edge of the green screen on the edge over there?
But I was only observing.
That's just a Max
Observing
Sennett roll. That's
murders?
a piece of plastic with a
I
cityscape on.
intercepted a coded communique sent from my planet to Alto. Styles and Ingram were involved with the O'Mara.
You lost me.
The O'Mara are a nomadic race from beyond the rim
Everyone
world.
recognize Ken Shackelford?
Thieves, killers. They've looted dozens of planets, including my own. And Altor is their next target.
What are you telling me? Altor's about to be invaded?
Yes. Eventually. It may not seem like it now, but my planet was taken by surprise. It was all over before we knew it had begun.
Well, why come to me? Why go to the military?
Oh, no. The risks are too great. The O'Marans will have spies everywhere. If you would work for them, you'd have blown me out of the sky when you first pursued me.
You know, I gotta tell you, this is a little hard to believe. You're saying that Styles and Ingram were killed by this O'Mara?
That is the way the O'Marans work. They use people, often without their knowledge, until they've served their purpose, and then they dispose of them.
Well, what's in it for you? Why are you doing this?
Revenge, I suppose. And because I cannot let them destroy another people like they did mine. Move down and hover over that building there.
So what do we do here?
The O'Mara communique mentioned one other name. Koprov. This is where he lives. And maybe he will lead us to the O'Mara.
Is that the guy?
Yes, that's him. Very good. Now follow.
What if I say no?
I've lost everything, Lieutenant. Family, home, friends, all gone. The only thing I have to live for is the destruction of the Omera. Now, you can either assist me or oppose me. There is no middle ground.
Piece of the model at that point, fly out there. This show, when do you think that was shot? 60s, 70s? Sensible. Anyone else? I usually get 83 or 84. That's what I usually get is 83, 84. You know, like Powers of Matthew Starr kind of that time. This show was shot almost, well, at least 4 years after the Star Trek. It was shot in 94. The Star Trek was shot in 90. And it was shot for about the same amount of money. Not far removed. The Star Trek was shot for $1.8 million. This was, I think, $1.4. And in England, $1.4 million goes a lot farther there than it does here. So it was comparable. And you see models, you got models on strings, right? We had motion control back in the original show in the 60s, and they've got models on strings and tabletop models. And I love the Jim Carrey claw approach of the dog. The first time I saw it, I fell on my floor, my stomach hurting. And why am I showing you this? You often wonder. You watch a movie, let's say, like Johnny Depp was wonderful in Pirates of the Caribbean. And any of you that saw the Lone Ranger film thought, what happened? Why did he do this? Right? And you just get in these situations where certain decisions get made. Let's do an action Western comedy like Lone Ranger, and let's have 2 Indian massacres in it. That'll be entertaining. What a agonizingly stupid idea, but it just happens that you start getting into these rooms. It's kind of like the Iraq War. Oh, we'll do this, we'll do that, and it'll work out fine. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with these TV shows and movies. So many elements can go wrong. One performance, one story idea, one bad production choice, and one thing leads to another, and it just turns into something ludicrous. And that's just so you know, it's a lot harder to do than it looks to write something good. And it's even harder to do than it looks to produce it properly so that what's on paper will actually play well. The same writers wrote this stuff that wrote the Star Trek. And it was like night and day. You would swear we weren't involved. Let's move on. Okay, now Gene Roddenberry here, the reasons these pictures exist, and I have them on my office wall, is that Roddenberry is he was very sweet to us guys, okay? He had very little involvement with Next Generation. He would show up like 1 day a week to his office. His assistant would drive him in his yellow Bentley to his office. And some of us, I was a fan from Man-Trap. Man-Trap was the first episode of the original Star Trek. I saw it as a teenager and I was hooked. In fact, so hooked that eventually my mentor in Los Angeles was George Clayton Johnson, who wrote that episode, a very good mentor. And all of us fans, the true Trekkies, they invited us to the set to take publicity pictures of us, and he showed up and he signed our pictures. I mean, that's the kind of guy he was. So I'm proud of it. I'm not proud of the fact that I'm don't look anything like that anymore. I live in the valley, just too many, the valley, McAllen, just too many burritos, guys, too many breakfast tacos. That's the worst thing about living in the valley. He visited the set of our episode.
So you actually create
I've never seen this. It's Stargate.
We must first have the code of life from the juices of the species intended as the host.
Let's move on. Stargate. The interesting thing about Stargate was they shot it in Vancouver, and you notice that almost all the worlds they went to happened to be in a forest or in a desert. There's an old strip mine. That was the desert, and there's a forest because they have a park there. If they'd had the biggest junkyard in the world, every planet would have had a junkyard. Okay? Because there's no cities. The city in Vancouver is particularly unfilmable. Outside of, like, X-Files, they had those streets, the little residential streets. The city itself is amazingly unfilmable. It's all brand new, and it doesn't look right from any angle. So really, you can shoot in the forest, or you can shoot whatever. So every episode was like that. But we created Hathor. If you follow the show, my partner and I created Hathor. Okay. Any questions about Buck Rogers? Any interest in that? This is a remake, by the way. You know, there was a Buck Rogers in the 50s. It was a live golden age TV show. It was shot in New York. I think it was for the DuPont network. And it doesn't exist. No copies of it exist. They didn't have kinescopes even for that show. This show still exists. This is not a filthy title of any kind. Anyone remember the Flying 69th, the James Cagney movie? The Flying 69th. It was about a battle unit in World War. It was a famous regiment in World War I. And basically, this was the over-the-hill gang in space. Basically, a bunch of old pilots are the only pilots that can go on a particular mission. And we hired Peter Graves and Woody Strode. And I got to sit around this set with Woody Strode, and we got to talk about John Ford. The point I'm making here is, for me, one of the joys of being in the film business was the oral history. When you get to sit on the set and you get to talk to people like Woody Strode, what was it like to shoot Sergeant Rutledge? What was it like to work with John Ford? And it's amazing what you find, what you learn, the things you pick up. I later worked with Woody Strode's son on Diagnosis Murder. To me, that's a joy of being in the business, because I'm still a fan. You know, when I meet somebody from the business, say, "Oh, did you work with so-and-so?" I went to a film festival once in Beaumont, Texas. Okay? And the guy that showed up, there were supposed to be 3 people on a producer panel. 2 of them didn't show up, so the producer was standing up there. He had produced a film called Scarecrow, a TV movie with Charles Durning, a very scary Scarecrow movie, Night of the Scarecrow. He's standing up there alone. Says, "Is any producers in the audience?" So I volunteered, went up there, and I was talking with him, and we had both worked on Twilight Zone. And we were just having a discussion, talking about the people we worked with in front of the audience like they weren't there. Peter Graves was in it, and Gil Gerard. Erin Gray is back again. She's working in, any of you watch The Guild? And Tech? Any of you watch Tech War? Boy, I worked on a lot of instant trivia questions. There was a show I did called Beyond Westworld. It was a sequel to Westworld. They ordered 6. They aired 5. They shot 4. No, they shot 5. They aired 4. That was a hit. Okay. This is my most personal project. Okay. We have plenty of time, right? Until 1 o'clock? I got 15 minutes? Okay. This was my most personal project. I want to talk about this in the sense of any kind of personal expression. I lived in Venice at the time, Venice, California. I would walk to the beach and back. And I was walking back from the beach, and I was past this little church, and they had a rummage sale in front of it. And one of the items they were selling was a little kid's bed, a little children's bed. And I got the horrible epiphany or feeling that whatever child last slept in that bed died in it. Now, that almost certainly wasn't the case. They just outgrew it and got rid of it. But by the time I got home, I had a story. And I wrote the story, If She Dies, and about a haunted bed. And it was about this man's kid, his baby is hurt in a car accident, ends up in the hospital and she's dying. And then he encounters this nun at a rummage sale at this orphanage that's about to be torn down and buys a haunted bed. Haunted by the ghost of a dead child, the same age as his baby, his little girl. And it was a very interesting story, and let me see what the clip looks like. Go to the hospital scene. She's hurt in a car accident, and then he's in the hospital, and the doctor's telling him the bad news.
Third floor upstairs.
She's not responding.
Oh, no. You just saw her move a moment ago.
Involuntary reflexes. Her vital signs are fading, Paul. We almost lost her last night.
But there's still hope, isn't there? I mean, I can still hope, right? No. Please. You can't give up. Her mother. I mean, I lost a mother a year ago, and...
I understand that.
I mean, she's all I have. And if she dies... I don't...
Well, we'll do what we can. I'll give you a prescription to help you sleep. But you have to promise me you'll be careful, okay?
I keep thinking she's trying to talk to me. Calling me, you know. Maybe in her mind.
Go home. We'll call you if there's any change. Get some rest.
What makes you think home is someplace I can rest?
There's a little girl on the roof.
A little girl on the roof? Surely you must be mistaken.
No, I saw her.
Well, there aren't any children here. They left yesterday, all of them. The orphanage is closed.
This is an orphanage?
Well, it was. St. Amelia's orphanage, God bless us. They're tearing it down next week. And all the children are at the new building. So you couldn't have seen anyone on the roof.
But I saw her just a moment ago. I was afraid she might fall. I saw her quite clearly.
I don't think so. But feel free to look around. We're mostly down to odds and ends from the basement, but there might be something you could use. And you'd be helping the children.
What?
Everything you see here is for sale.
No, I'm not interested in buying anything.
a lovely old piece, isn't it? Do you have a child?
Yes, a daughter.
Perhaps she'd like it.
I don't think so, sister.
Well, perhaps there's something else.
No. How much?
For the bed?
Yes.
Well, I don't know, really. It's an antique.
Is this enough?
Yes, I'm sure that's more than enough.
I'll get my car.
Okay. Now, were you intrigued? Were you pulled in? Okay. A good story has an emotional issue or problem. The world is not perfect. The world is not right. The hero has hopefully a really difficult and insoluble problem. I've got a dying kid, and there's nothing I can do. And then a solution presents itself. And does he take the challenge or not? In this particular case, does he buy the bed or not? He has a decision to make. A good story, the character has a decision to make. He isn't just forced to make a decision. He isn't forced by circumstance. He makes a choice, which reflects on the quality of the character that you're creating. And then he takes a chance and he chooses the bed or whatever. And the bed will provide the solution in an interesting way. Or not. In a tragedy, the solution doesn't present itself, or the character fails because of his fatal flaw or whatever, like Aristotle would say. Or it's a satisfying drama in a different sense where the hero achieves his goal. One final thing I'll say about writing. Any of you interested in writing or just knowing what you're looking at. What are foreign films are about? Foreign films and television shows tend to be about life. I mean, they show life. Character does his best and fails, and that's just the way it works. What are American films and TV shows about? Winning. He said winning. What else? Anyone else? Which he's close, very close. What are American TV shows and films about, basically? What's the basic thing they're about? Foreign films and TV shows are about life. What are American films and TV shows about? Good choice. Sensible. Huh? Action. Death. Okay. Violence. You're all right to a degree. American films and TV shows are about empowerment. And there's lots of good and bad things about that. If you've ever seen any Schwarzenegger movie, you know how bad it can be. If you've seen any of the Expendables films, how bad it can be. But also it's very appealing because most foreign films and TV shows are about life and the characters lose because the circumstances beyond their control, because that's what life is like for most of us, at least at some point. And what's so appealing about the American ethos in films and TV is they're about empowerment. Characters succeed. Characters have power. There's a lot of bad things about that. I mean, you can go on a list of, reactionary, whatever kind of shows we've done that show terrible values or whatever. If you've ever seen Meet Cody Banks, those two films, which were about a 9-year-old secret agent who goes to summer camp where the CIA secretly trains him to be a killer without his parents' knowledge. This is something Hitler would have enjoyed. This is a Hitler Youth idea. It's shown as a light comedy. And how funny. It's a terrible idea. But it's about empowerment, and that's very appealing. And it's been a good thing for the film industry and film business. I guess I should wrap up with a couple of, before that I'll do a little advertisement here. This is my book, No Power on Earth. I've got copies over there if you're interested. And this is the publisher. It was published back very successfully some time ago, and this is a reprint, a revision. It's a whole new book, and love to see you come by. Any questions?
We'd like folks that have questions to come up. Is this on? Can you all hear me? All right. We'd like to have you come up and say your question into the microphone because we have a limited length on this. Anybody have a question for Mr. Carren about any of the Star Trek characters or any of his experiences? Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask you, did you have anything to do with the Deep Space Nine series?
No, I did not. That was the first spin-off. They did 2. Well, they did 3. Excuse me. No, didn't have anything to do with it. But I did know all the people involved, and I was proud of the fact that every week during the 3rd and 4th season they were doing an old war movie. If you notice, they did Bataan. They did None But the Brave. They did Darby's Rangers. They even did Guns of Navarone. They did every war movie. I was very proud of them for that. They were excited they were doing old war films.
Well, I really love Star Trek, all of them.
Well,
but
thank you.
I don't know why I fell in love with Deep Space Nine the most, I guess.
It was a war show.
Yeah, got a lot of
it was the best war show on the air since Combat. You remember Combat?
Anybody else like to come up and ask Mr. Carren a question? So if somebody has the script to end all scripts or the story to end all stories, how would you recommend that they put it out there for people to see?
Well, the first thing you need to do, the thing that kills screenplays with producers, agents, and film festivals, script competitions, is they're not written in a proper format and they're not properly proofed, believe it or not. I have students that write for me in my writing classes at UTPA. By the way, I must put in a plug for University of Texas Pan American, soon to be the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, in McAllen and Edinburgh and Bronzeville. We're combining campuses with UTB and UTPA in Bronzeville and Edinburgh, and we have the best unified theater film program in the country outside Toledo, Ohio. If you don't want to move to Toledo, Ohio, you got to come to us. But what I tell my students in my script writing classes is presentation is all important in writing this material. Well, we have an English teacher here, right? Right? If you were going to send a brilliantly written story to a publisher and you've misspelled they are there as Their, what happens? They'll throw it out. Even if it's the best written story in the world, they'll throw it out. Yeah. And I ate grandma, and he ate his grandma, because there's no comma between ate and grandma, right? I get that a lot. Please, anything like that is very destructive. You've got to really have your format down. You've got to have it proofed properly. The scenes can't be more than 3 pages long, and they have to begin in the middle. You notice how these scenes tend to begin in the middle in a good story, and they end with a really dramatic moment at the end. You know this. You watch this stuff. If it doesn't do that, you get bored, right? So, but the best access I know of today is script competitions and film festivals, because it's very hard unless you want to move to Los Angeles to deal with those crazy people. It's very hard to get a career going, and I don't blame you if you don't want to do that. I used to be one of those crazy people. You know, if you want to stay in your community, then you do it yourself. You get a laptop and a camera and software, and you can shoot and edit your own movies for under $3,000 a day. Do your own films, write your own films if you want. Just be aware it's going to be very hard to sell them, but so what else is new? You can do what you want. How many filmmakers we have here? Any potential filmmakers? God, everyone's sane. Oh, okay. It's tough to do, but you can do it on your own now. You don't have to depend on anybody else. All right. Thank you very much.
You're listening to IRN 2014 Border Zone International UFO Conference.